Builder! Why should you learn how to use the waveform monitor in your GH5 or GH5S? 1. Because you can quickly see if you're clipping the highlights or the shadows. 2. You can literally use it as a light meter and spot check your actors' faces or any other background objects so that you don't have to do level adjustments in post-production. 3. Do you like to shoot on green screen? You can actually use the waveform monitor to determine if your green screen backdrop is lit evenly.
Done. Roll that intro.
What's up, everybody? You're watching Too Long Didn't Read Filmmaker, where the answers comes first, the reasons come last, but we are constantly and always still learning. So today I'm gonna go over another one of my top 5 features in the GH5 and the GH5S and why you need to learn how to use it. And today that feature happens to be the waveform monitor. Now, what is the waveform monitor? Basically, the waveform monitor is going to give you a very quick representation of what your GH5 or GH5S is seeing in terms of light value. Now, why is this important and why should you learn it? Let's talk about that. So where can you locate this feature? This feature is in your menus. It's actually in the first video camera menu on the first page, and it's located right here at the bottom, and you can simply turn it on and turn it off from there. However, I will actually say you should assign this to one of the many function buttons on your GH5 or GH5S. That way you don't have to go into the menus. You can actually just hit that function button. It's gonna bring it up, and then you can take it off and go right about your business. Okay, so why is it super important for you to know how to read this waveform monitor? Well, basically there's 2 lines here, and this line represents 0% where it's the darkest of the dark, and this one is 100% the brightest of the bright. You definitely do not want to exceed past these limits, because if you do, the camera no longer knows what's actually there. It's just gonna default and say, okay, this is just pure black. So if you suddenly have something that's really important, let's say that Rubik's Cube back there, if that Rubik's Cube is below 0, then that means if I suddenly say, crap, I can't see the Rubik's Cube, and you go into your editor and you try to bring up the shadows, you're not gonna see anything back there. It's just gonna be blank because your camera basically said there's nothing there, it's zeroed out, that's gonna be black. You don't want that. Or let's say my face. If my face starts to reach into 100 or higher than 100, and I suddenly go, no, I don't want that angelic look, I want this look that you're currently seeing. If you go into post and try to bring it back down, you'll notice that like my eye, probably like up here, my eyelids, anything here is just gonna be a complete blank white, and you can't see any details and curvature of my face. All you're gonna really see are my eyebrows, my eyes, and my mouth, and probably my nasal passages, okay? So that's why you need to make sure you look at the waveform monitor and know that you're not clipping in the highlights and you're not clipping in the shadows. Even though you're looking at the monitor and the monitor might look okay to you, don't trust it. Trust the waveform monitor, because that is literally telling you what the camera sees. Now that's the most important reason why you should know about that feature. But there's actually 2 little fun ways you can actually use this feature as well. So let's say you're lighting up a scene, this scene for example, but you're shooting a wide, so you're much further back. Now the light is hitting where my character technically would be standing, but you're like, well, I actually don't know if it's too bright or too dark. So what you can do is you can actually turn on the waveform monitor and step back a little bit. Hopefully you have a zoom lens of some kind, zoom in onto the person's face, and then look at the waveform monitor. That waveform monitor will basically tell you what that light is actually registering on this person's face. So at the time of this recording, my face over here where the light is, it's reading somewhere between, I would say about 60% is what I have it set to. And over here in my shadows, we're getting down to maybe 40, even down to 30%. So my face has that amount of range from 60 to 30%. So when you're basically pointing your camera at the actor, you can tell the grip or the director of photography, no, we need to raise the light up. It looks like their face, the brightest part of their face is actually not that bright with the way the camera is set. So let's bump that light up. Or maybe it's too bright, let's bump it down. So that's a really quick and dirty way to kind of get an idea if the person you're trying to light is within the realm of where you want it to be for your scene, or The background. No, the background is way too dark. The camera is registering a 0. Let's brighten it up with a China ball so we don't lose it, so we can actually see what's going on. Or you look at, I don't know, outside a window, and let's say you do need to see what's outside that window, and you're saying, oh crap, like we're all the way at 100 right now. We literally see nothing. So we need to bring it back down. All right, and the last tip of how you can use this waveform monitor is lighting a backdrop or a green screen or blue screen cyc. Now that might sound a little weird, but hear me out, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be blasphemy for anyone that lights it traditionally. But basically, I was tasked at one point by the local green screen studio that I work part-time at, and basically they realized that the cyc had a hotspot in it, which means one spot was a lot brighter than the other part of the greens. Now, while modern software is getting better and better at keying out an unevenly lit green cyc, you generally still would like to keep it all one level. So when I was tasked to even out the lighting, I didn't have a traditional light meter, I didn't have anything, but what I did have was my GH5. So I turned on the waveform monitor, stepped all the way back, big old wide shot, and I shot it at the green screen, and I looked at what the camera was seeing. And sure enough, where there was a hot spot, you kind of saw this line, and then it ramped up and then ramped back down. That was where my hot spot was. Now, if you try to light a green screen cyc traditionally, it'll probably take you forever because there's actually a grid up top where the light is coming from. So I had to get a lift, I had to go up there, and I had to move these lights. So can you imagine me having to move the lights, come back down, check the reading, oh no, it's not good, go back up and move the lights? Takes too much time. So what I ended up doing was I got on that lift, I started moving the lights about, and then I took my GH5 and I would point it down at it until I got that level to where the rest of it was. So after doing that for maybe about an hour, came back down, went back, shot it at the green screen, looked at the waveform monitor, and sure enough, I was getting a pretty straight line. Was it perfectly straight? Of course not, but it was pretty darn close, and there was really no variance. Like if there was a variance, it probably hovered between 45 and 50%, like that's where that line was. But whatever it was way better than that hill. So if you are doing some green screen work and you want to make sure that the cyc, the backdrop, what have you, is evenly lit, using the waveform monitor is a very quick and dirty way to make sure that it is evenly lit. Okay, so now that you know why it's important for you to learn about the waveform monitor and why you would use it, I'm going to give you some general guidelines, and of course you can break these guidelines however you want, but this is just personally what I do with the waveform monitor. So even though your camera can see from 0% to 100%, I don't actually say you should, because when you get to those points, you're getting dangerously close to when the camera just completely says, okay, that's super white and that's super black, and I'm not gonna try to retain anything. So the best thing that I generally do is on my darkest part of the scenes, like back here, I kind of leave it at 10%, like that's a little bit where I want. That way I know if I do want to push it all the way down to 0, I can, and you can kind of still see remnants of what's actually back there. Then same thing with the highlights. I go to 90 because a lot of things that people complain about these consumer cameras, how it's never going to be a Red, it's never going to be an RE camera, it's not going to be some camera that's worth 30 grand, within good reason. So basically what happens is we have something called highlight roll-off is the term, and basically we want a highlight roll-off that's nice and gentle, so that you retain the information that's back in the clouds or out the window, and you can still clearly see what's going on. But these consumer cameras, they don't have a good highlight roll off generally, and they kind of ramps up. And I don't really know why they do this, but that's what they do. So generally speaking, I try to make sure the brightest of the bright is somewhere at 90, especially if there's something I want to see. That's as high as I'll go. Because if I want to push it up to 100%, I can, or if I want to lower it a little bit, I'll still get a nice detail and I won't end up with something that's kind of blotchy looking. But that being said, I'm actually gonna go even further on that note. I actually try to make sure if I want to see something in the highlights, I will go as far as going down to 80% being the highest it will go into the camera, because that means it's gonna retain a lot of that detail and it's not gonna hit that weird spike. And therefore, if I do want to push it up to 90 or push it up to 100, I'll still get a nice good roll off and I can actually see the details. It's a little controversial in terms of how people want to go about that, but for me, generally speaking, I never grade something up to 100 in a cinematic form. Over here, that light back there is definitely hitting basically 90 to 100% because my head is blocking most of it. So all you really see is that little halo, and that stays within realm. There's no detail back there, it's just a wall. So experiment, figure out what you do. For me, I realize that when I'm color correcting a lot of the scenes that I do, I generally don't want the brightest part of the scene to be 100 because I realize that TVs always do some weird algorithm. So even though I meticulously put everything in a nice spot, the TV is going to do whatever the heck it wants and interprets it however the heck it wants. That being said, that's why I stay at 80, because I know if it decides to do something crazy with it, people at home are still going to be able to see what it is I want them to see, and it's not going to register as completely white. Okay, so that was a lot of information. What is the bottom line here? If you own a GH5 or a GH5S, do yourself a huge favor and learn how to read a waveform monitor, because that is going to help you in terms of lighting your scenes and getting an idea of what your camera is actually seeing. Because the last thing you want to do is go into your editing suite and realize you're too blown out or you're too clipped towards the shadows and you're crushing it, and then you're trying to balance it out with curves and master wheels, what have you, and suddenly you realize that you've lost the detail and you actually can't recover anything. That is the last thing you want to do. And the fact that these cameras have this feature built in, learn how to read it and immediately make decisions right on set so that you know when you go into editing, you're good to go. And hey, that's it for this week, everybody. If this video has made all the influence in your decision to either purchase a GH5 or a GH5S, I would really appreciate it if you check out my Amazon affiliate links down below. Again, this costs nothing extra to you. It just gives me a little commission so I can continue making videos like this for you. Now, if you have any questions, do leave it in the comments. I try to get to them as fast as I can. And if not, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week.